Today is Wednesday, November 15th, 2017. My name is Edna Sussman. I'm a reference librarian here at the Half Hollow Hills Community Library. We're interviewing Frank J Mansuetto, a Vietnam Army veteran, as part of our Veterans Testimonial Project and in collaboration with the Library of Congress's Veterans History Project. Thank you so much, Frank, for your service and for being willing to participate in our project today.
Thank you.
Frank, where and when were you born?
I was born in Brooklyn, New York, July 19, 1949.
And who were your parents, their names, and what they did?
My father's name was Thomas Mansuetto, and my mother's name was Rose Mansuetto. My father was a printer. He learned how to do printing when he was in the Philippines in World War II.
Really?
And my mom, she always worked in the house, but she worked at Sears and Roebuck for a while, if you remember that.
Oh, sure, of course. Did you have any siblings?
I had a brother named Thomas, named after my father, and he's still alive, and he lives in Brooklyn right now.
Mm-hmm. Was he in the service?
No, he was not. Mm-hmm. He's 5 years younger, so he missed it.
Oh, okay. What were you doing before you entered the service?
I was working on Wall Street. I think everybody worked on Wall Street during that period of time. They were making a conversion from handwriting everything to computers, and they needed young people at a high school that were willing to work there, and they paid us well, and we worked a lot of overtime.
So you went right out of high school for that job?
Right out of high school, I was going to college, at night, to Brooklyn College.
Oh, okay, and working during the day?
And working during the day.
Wow. And now, you served in the Army. Did you enlist or were you drafted?
Well, I had a very low number. They used the lottery at the time, and because I had a low number, the recruiting people convinced me to join. So I ended up serving 3 years rather than 2 years in the military.
Well, you mean joining? You had other.
Joined the draft, they call it. It's a terminology they use that if you get drafted, like I did, and the number didn't come up yet, but it's inevitable that it was because it was very low. If I joined the draft, they would give me different perks.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I never knew that.
And I think that was one of the reasons why I wasn't a grunt or in the infantry. They gave me an opportunity to go to school while I was in the military, learn how to do communication equipment and how to fix it.
Oh, wow.
And so it was a wise decision, I think. Maybe I'm alive today because of that.
So by doing that, your service was increased to 3 instead of 2?
It's 2. I had to give up, I had to serve an extra year in order to benefit from all the schooling and everything.
Now, what year did you go in?
67, 68, 69, and 70.
Okay, so first, you were drafted by the Army?
Yes.
Okay, so you didn't have a choice of branch, actually.
No, I did not.
Okay. So what happened after you were drafted? You departed for training camp? What was that?
Well, they send you, they give you a token to get on the train and take it to Fort Hamilton in Brooklyn.
Okay.
That's where it was. And we would get checked out physically to make sure that we were physically capable to serve. Back then, flat feet was a big thing.
Really? You got excused?
I could have gotten excused, but I chose not to. I had flat feet, and I still do.
Huh.
And during that period of time, they accepted me in. I took a written test. It wasn't very intense. I think if I wrote my name correctly and my address, I was in. It was that easy. And then from there, I went home for, I think, 30 days until I got my orders. And then I went to South Carolina or North Carolina, one of the training bases.
Okay, and so how long was the basic training?
There was basic training that lasted a couple of months, and then there was advanced training, which is how I learned the skills that I learned when I went to Vietnam. And that was another month and a half.
And that involved the communications that you got?
Yes, it did.
Did you pick that?
Well, they gave me several choices after they gave me these, I guess they called them IQ tests, to see what I'm qualified to do, what I'm capable of learning. Because we were young. We're talking about 21 years old, 20 years old, never went to other than high school, and they didn't know my ability, so they wanted to see if I was capable of learning certain things. And so, so they gave me a choice. So one of them was ComSat communication, they call it, supply clerk, and that was my secondary. And I was able to learn, and that was good. It was good for me.
That was after basic. How
That
long
was after basic, then we went to advanced. Then I went home for 30 days
Oh.
for leave, and that's when they gave me my orders to Vietnam.
Oh, wow.
So it was really quick.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, there wasn't like a honeymoon period where we learned how to march and shoot our M16 rifles.
In the basic, how long was that?
The basic was 2 months.
2 months? And
We
then,
learned how to run, we learned how to wear our uniforms, to respect the officers in charge, how to take orders. And as long as we did all those things correctly, we were able to go to the war. And
were you staying on a base at
in
that time?
a barracks, we stayed in
Barracks.
barracks, yes.
And food, how was all that?
Chocolate milk was excellent. The chocolate milk was excellent. I loved the chocolate milk. You used to pull the lever down and the milk would come out, and oh, it was the best. Yeah, to today, I still love it. Tasted like Yoo-hoo, actually.
Oh,
It
those
was
are
really
good.
good.
Yeah.
It was one of the best things. And they had a couple of meals that were good, but most of them were very, they weren't gourmet. I mean, and it wasn't intended to. It was supposed to be give you the vitamins you needed,
Yeah.
and that was about it. It wasn't supposed to be anything special.
So when you got the training, the specialized training, how long did that last?
About a month and a half.
In South Carolina then?
Yeah.
That was also you staying in
We
barracks?
changed from one location in South Carolina in the same Army base. I forgot the name of it.
Is Lejeune there, or is that North Carolina?
No, that wasn't Lejeune, no. If you said the name, I would remember it, but I can't remember it right now. But anyway, it was in the same Army base where we went to the advanced training. And that's
okay.
where we learned. We just moved to a different location so the new troops can come in.
Okay. Do you recall your instructors for either of the trainings?
No, they were all mean.
They were?
Yeah, they were pretty intense. Back then, I guess you were allowed to curse and get a little physical, and if you weren't, I mean, they would make fun of your name. They would call you different, like if you had a name that was too long, they called you alphabet. Nothing too intense.
Right.
I guess they had their limitations, but they wanted to work you. I was always in good shape. I was able to run. I played football in high school, and I was able to keep up with any of their regiments that they gave me, you know. I have a quick story about when we trained to shoot our weapon, which was quite interesting. I can't wink this eye. So when I shot at the target, I wasn't able to hit the target. And the sergeant I couldn't advance unless I was able to hit the target, at least hit the, maybe it was 50 yards away, and you have to hit a target maybe so big. And if you don't at least hit the target, you don't have to get a bullseye, but hit the target, you would, they wouldn't advance you, and they wanted to advance everybody. So he would sit next to me, and he couldn't figure out why I had such a problem.
Did you know you had the problem?
No, I didn't know. They would teach you how to hold the rifle and how to squeeze the trigger and how to squint and look at the target and line it up. But what happens if you squint with the wrong eye, the target's off by a foot.
Oh, wow.
So I didn't know this, and he's trying to figure it out. Finally, he says, "Let me look at you." And he says, "Close your right eye." And I went like this. He goes, "Okay, close your left eye." "I can't, Sergeant." And he says, "What do you mean you can't?" I said, "I can't close my left eye independently. I have to go like this." He goes, "That's your problem." So they gave me a patch over my eye so I can shoot. So my eye closes. And then they told me to hold the rifle in my left hand. And I was able to get marksmanship. I got the highest grade you could possibly get.
But God forbid that happens out in the middle of Vietnam.
Oh, I mean, they wouldn't have sent me because they knew, I mean, even though I was going into communications, I wasn't going to be infantry. You have to protect yourself.
Right,
You have to be able to, if they overtake your compound, they call it, you have to be able to protect yourself and protect the equipment. I'll explain all that later. But when I switched to my left hand, the rifle was a right-handed rifle. They didn't make left-handed rifles. So all the rounds after they discharged would go down my neck and burn my neck.
Oh, God. God.
So they had to put a special, so it was it's funny because I would shoot, I would go bang, and then I go, ouch, bang, and the sergeant kept saying, why are you yelling? I go, the rounds are going down my jacket, my shirt. So I would get all these scars on my neck, and finally they put a special plate that when the round would come out, it would hit and then fall, a shield, and it would fall down to the ground like it should. So that was a funny story.
Yeah, but I don't understand if you had to shoot at a moment's notice in the field. How, you would put a patch on right away?
Well, that's why they switched me to left-handed.
And that
way I wouldn't have to put a patch on.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, they did it initially because they wanted to see if I had some kind of mental problem not being able to hit the target. So once they put the patch on, I was able to hit the target.
Oh, so then they figured out to switch
Then
the
they
side.
said, okay, so let's just make you lefty. There's plenty of lefties here. It's not like unusual.
So then it worked okay.
Yeah, then it worked okay.
So you always had the same weapon because it had that special shield on.
Yeah, they had that had to be something I took with me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I did.
Wow, that's very interesting. What was your specialized training like for communications?
It was more civil. There was less yelling and screaming, and there was less physicality. It was more educational. I had to sit down and learn how to work these scopes that actually fixed radios when they were shot up in the field. We would take the radios back, and we would replace them with working radios that we had fixed.
Oh.
And so that was my responsibility.
That's pretty detailed work.
Yeah, and I don't remember a lot of it other than we did have a top secret clearance because a lot of the material was confidential, and it was programmed in such a way, they didn't have computers back then, but it was all done with diodes and everything. And these diodes had to be coded a certain way, and those codes were top secret because that's how the military communicated. So if they wanted to do an aerial attack on the enemy, they would use this equipment that we fixed for them, and we didn't want the enemy to be able to tap into the communications. So that's why we had top secret clearances.
Did you have to learn the codes?
Not the code, but we had to learn how to put the material inside the actual radio in order for it to work properly.
Wow.
And we took the old ones that were either in the swamps where they were buried underwater and bugs and leeches, and sometimes they were shot up with weapons. Sometimes they were recoverable, sometimes they were not.
If they got into the wrong hands, if they weren't
Oh,
recovered?
it would be a big problem because we'd have to change all the codes and everything. And that's why we weren't allowed to talk to people about what we did. I mean, now it doesn't matter, but back then it was a big thing. And for young people, it was a big thing because who has a top secret clearance at 20 years old, you know?
Wow.
And, you know, it was quite interesting.
Was that pretty much your whole tour of duty was doing that?
Later on, when I came back to the States, they didn't have need for that. They did send me to San Pedro, California when I came back from Vietnam, and it was all underground because it was the protection of the West Coast. In case we got invaded, it was all underground. Nobody knows it's there. And we needed our top secret clearance for that as well, for all the radar equipment. It switched from ComSac to radar, you know, and we would provide them the supplies necessary for that.
The whole time you were in Vietnam for the year, you did that?
That's what I did,
That's
yes.
what you did. How was it adapting to military life, including the physical regimen, the social life, if any, food, barracks? How was that?
Military life is different. It's very unique. I mean, there's nothing like that, and I haven't experienced anything like that in my life. It's very regimented. You don't have to think a whole lot. Do your responsibility, because every day you wake up, you have the same clothes. You don't have to say, what tie am I going to put on? What colored shirt am I going to wear? You wear khakis. This is what you wore when you were in Vietnam. Sometimes we would get dressed up if some higher up died, and we had to get dressed up in our blues, they called it, and wear our nice clothes and everything. But generally, we didn't have to think about that. Same thing with food. It's not like you have a whole choice of a menu. They give you, I don't know what they did back then, if there was vegans or vegetarians, because
Probably not too many.
everything was meat and potatoes. So, you know, they tried to beef you up and give you the protein you needed. So and you had to follow the rules. I mean, there wasn't such a thing as you have an opinion. There were no opinions other than the opinion of your commanding officer.
Was that, did that take a while to, I guess they don't give you time to adjust to that, you just do?
No, you just do it. And some of the people had a tough time. They couldn't take orders. They felt, I don't know if it was pride or just difficulty growing up in an environment. But I grew up in an Italian family, and we always had rules in our family. We followed rules. Living in Brooklyn, we had to follow certain rules about crossing the street when we were young, taking the bus and the train to school. I went to parochial school. I had to take a bus and a train to parochial school.
By yourself you did?
By myself, yeah.
Wow.
So I had to learn the rules of the road and don't talk to anybody, that kind of stuff. And so I would walk to Kings Highway, take the bus to McDonald Avenue, take McDonald Avenue train all the way to Prospect Park to where I went to Bishop Ford High School.
Wow.
That school doesn't exist anymore. They ran out of funding, I guess, for it. But that's what I had to do.
Yeah.
And I mean, I could have gone to a public school, which was Lafayette or New Utrecht High School, but my
Closer
parents,
to home?
It was much closer.
Oh.
Yeah, you could walk.
Oh.
But my parents felt that parochial school was better for me back then. Maybe it was. I don't know. I learned better.
You did, yeah.
Yeah.
And in the military then, what about social life? Was there any, did you get days off, or how did that?
Yeah, every once in a while we got a leave of absence where we could go, and but there wasn't when you're on the military base. Being as young as we are, we didn't know the city. We didn't have cars, so we couldn't. So we would end up going to the bar that was provided on base to sit and listen to music and have a couple of drinks. But and Vietnam was even worse. There was nothing. There was no social life, not really. I mean, you hung out with your buddies. There were no women. Back when I was in the military, there were no WACs. There were just Army guys, and I belonged to a unit that was predominant. Most of them were older than me, and they were all college graduates. That's how they got into the program.
Oh.
And I got into the program, like I said earlier, because I joined an extra year and they sent me to school.
And you had started college?
Yeah, I had started, but I was too young to finish. I had gotten drafted. They got drafted later, and they needed these guys to handle this equipment right from the beginning without having to have learned it.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, it was easier for them.
Now, how did you get from training in South Carolina to Vietnam? How did they get you there?
Well, after they finish the training, they send your orders to you in your mail at your home. You go on leave for 30 days. They give you 30 days before they send you to the next duty station. So during that period of time, I could have done anything I wanted to do. I mean, I was free. I mean, you don't want to do anything illegal, but you're supposed to, enjoy life, be with your family.
Yeah.
And then when the orders came that I was supposed to go to Vietnam, they don't tell you specifically where in Vietnam. They just tell you Vietnam.
Oh.
And they tell you where you're supposed to report. And basically, you report. I'll tell you a quick story about this. You report to New Jersey, and you take an actual commercial flight, and you take it to Alaska, and you land there, and then you get on a camouflage plane to take you to Vietnam.
Wow.
And
Is it direct from Alaska to Vietnam?
when you stop, get off the commercial flight,
Right.
and you get on the military flight.
But from there, then it was direct?
Then it was all there, direct to Vietnam, no stop. It was scary. That was the scary part. Then I knew I was heading to war. Because then they hand you your M16, you're in fatigues, and I happened to sit next to. Now there were no seats. You sit on the floor against the wall with your parachutes over your head, and you're sitting there like for it seemed like 8 hours. You're sitting there with the M16 between your legs, and I was sitting next to a grunt.
What does grunt mean?
Grunt means they basically seek and destroy. They look for the enemy. They actually physically look for the enemy to kill the enemy or destroy the enemy. So so I looked over to this guy and I wanted to have a conversation because I'm person that loves to have conversations for 7 hours. I wanted to talk to somebody. This guy wouldn't talk to me. And then I looked at his gun. He had like all these marks, hash marks in his weapon.
Yeah.
And it was kind of beat up, and his clothing was kind of faded from having washed it a few times. So he had made, this was his third time over to Vietnam. So he was a veteran that
Wow.
liked to serve there, I guess. But those hash marks were the people that he killed.
How could you tell he was a grunt?
Well, he wasn't, his uniform wasn't, mine was fresh. So I was brand new. He was already in country. They call it being in country. So he already had been in country, and you could tell he's older.
Oh, I see.
He was about maybe 5 or 6 years older. He had the look of having seen death. And I tried to talk with him. He wouldn't talk to me. I said, "What are those marks?" He says, "Those are the people I killed." And that's all he said the whole time.
Wow.
And he just sat there. I guess he was going to hook up with his unit again, and continue what he was doing before he went home on leave.
Wow.
They say you're only allowed to spend a year and then come home, a year and then come home.
Come home for how long in between?
30 days.
Oh.
Usually they send you home for 30 days. Now, he didn't have to go back.
Oh,
It's not mandatory, but he chose to. So
really? Wow.
that's what made him an interesting character,
Yep.
but wouldn't talk to me. So I could have gotten a lot of information.
Yep.
So as we're flying, after all those hours, I don't even remember going to the bathroom, but I remember the sergeant standing up, "We have arrived!" And he's yelling at us, "We have arrived! We are currently under attack!" So I said, "Oh, great, this is where I die." I really felt that way. Nobody feels they're going to really live. So he goes, "This is what we're going to do. When I say out," and the plane wouldn't land like a normal commercial flight. It would hover over the area and keep circling until there's an opportunity where there's less firing of weapons, and then the plane would just drop straight down like it's crashing. And we're like straight back in our seats like this. And that was frightening because, I didn't fly a whole lot as a kid.
Sure.
In fact, that was the first time I ever flew, was when I got on those
Really?
planes. Yeah, it just didn't fly. I mean, you got in a car and drove a few hours to the Catskill Mountains, and that was it.
yeah.
With your parents. Got on a bus or a train and you went places, and that was it. Anyway, the plane is, so evidently the plane comes straight down like this, and then the pilot pulls up on the lever and he lands, and then they slam on the brakes because they don't want to be on the tarmac for very long because it's an easy target for the enemy to drop in, bombs. And the thing with the back of the plane would drop open, and he would go, "Go, go, go, go," and we'd run. And I remember running
Where do you run to?
to the bunker
Oh.
because we were under attack. So I'm holding. I knew how to hold a gun. I knew how to run with combat boots on, and I was scared.
Sure.
I thought it was all over. So I ran, and I was thinking, because I used to play football, just run. Just run as fast as you can. So I ran, and I felt like Forrest Gump. Run, Forrest, run. And I'm running and running and running, and finally we get to the bunker, and we lay down, and we can hear the bombs going off around us. And then they stop, because they know that planes are going to land at certain times, and they try to blow them up and try to kill all the military before they even get in country.
How awful.
So that was the
That's very
very
scary.
first experience.
And you had a parachute on your back still.
Well, no, the parachute was over my head. We put the parachute on if we crashed.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we never had it connected to us. I don't think I would have ever used it. I probably would have just jumped out without a parachute.
Did they teach you how to use it?
No, I was not airborne, so that's a whole different advanced training, how to jump out of an airplane and how to land correctly
see.
and how to pack your own chute and all of that.
So once you were in the bunker, how long were you?
We were in there for about 15 minutes, and then they all clear, they yelled, and then we went, they told us where we were supposed to go. So the next group of us, we were with the same group of people that had the advanced training, so we knew each other. And then we went to this other tent area, and they assign you in country to different areas. I was the only one assigned to North Vietnam. All my other friends went to Saigon, Long Ben, Cam Ranh Bay, big big areas where there was very military presence and very well protected. I went right to the heart of the war, into Fubai.
Wow.
And
You
I
and
had-
others too at that?
I was the only one. I went by myself. I had to get on a chopper and fly there. That was another scary experience. So there I am in the chopper, flying over rice paddies, things that I've never seen before, and the guy with his M60 machine gun hanging out the thing talking. Now they're talking. They go, yeah, let's shoot some people. So they're shooting at people in the rice paddies. Who knows if they were the enemy or not? He says, you really don't know. And he goes, you want to take a few shots? I go, no, thank you. That's okay.
Oh, jeez. Wow.
So when I landed on the area in Fubai, a Jeep came and picked me up and brought me to our compound. Now there was a big compound, and then there was a little compound which was ours, and that's the one with top secret. There was a compound within a compound. The compound has a barracks inside of it, and working area, and sandbags all around. It was a desert. It was very hot, maybe 120 degrees. I remember how hot I felt. But living in New York, it never gets that hot, but
It was probably humid.
it was
more.
very humid, yeah.
What time of year was this? Do you remember?
I don't remember when I landed, but it was hot. It was before the monsoons, because it hadn't rained. It was dry. Everything, a little wind made the dust fly all over the place. So when we landed, we got into the Jeep, and I don't remember much about what happened after that.
How long a distance did it take you to get to North Vietnam, that base there?
To get on the helicopter ride, maybe was a half hour. It
And then
wasn't
you were
long.
there.
And then we were there.
I didn't know we had a whole complex there in North Vietnam.
Yeah, next to Hue used to be the capital.
Wow.
Yeah, we used to dump our garbage out in the middle of the desert. It was interesting.
I mean, I guess you always had total guards watching.
We had actually, and I could tell you another story about that. The outside compound we were protected by the 101st Airborne, and those guys were trained to, if there was any attack, they knew what to do. But they would go out at night, and that's where we came in. They would go out at night, and if they saw action going on in the boonies, they called it, they would go out in the boonies and they would look for the enemy, seek and destroy. They would actually look for the enemy, find out, what they were doing. They would go out there with the police dogs that were trained to smell bombs, and they would go out there with their communication equipment, and sometimes the stuff would get shot up or they end up in the swamps. And they would come back, and they would come into our compound with the equipment, and we would trade it off.
Oh,
And that's
wow.
how that would work.
How many personnel do you think were on this?
In my compound, there was about 40 of us. On the outside, hundreds.
Really?
Hundreds. They had tanks, everything. We were well protected. But during Tet Offensive, we were almost overtaken. And we were asked to go and relieve the 101st Airborne on the outside perimeter. And that was...
You mean to protect?
Well, they needed to get sleep, and they were constantly watching, watchdogs. They were constantly looking at the outside perimeter. What they did was they cleared an area so that way the enemy would have to come into open land rather than right out of the forest.
They'd be visible.
So they would be visible, and they would build barbed wire and claymore mines. They would put so that way they can shoot, press the button, and the claymore mine would shoot and kill the enemy. So we were asked to go into the bunkers on the outside perimeters and relieve them for a day. And, we were trained, but not like them. So we would have an M60 machine gun or M16, and then there was a tank, and then there was another bunker with the same guys. And we were told by the colonel, he said, if you see movement out there, do not shoot them.
Why?
Because we weren't considered in a war. It was a conflict. They had to shoot us first.
Oh, God.
So those were the rules. But I like to follow rules, except that when I get a little nervous, I do what logic tells me. So they were starting to overtake the area. We were seeing they would wear black pajamas and they would wear the pointy hats.
Did they know that rule?
Oh, they knew it. That's why they knew they were protected from it. So I looked at the buddy that was in the bunker.
How many of you in the bunker?
Two.
Oh.
Two of us in the bunker. One would hold the the bullets if you would shoot them with the M60 machine gun, because it was a tripod type of operation. And we had all the buttons to shoot for the Claymore mines so they wouldn't get too close, and there was barbed wire. So it was difficult for them to get through, but if they knew what they were doing, they put wood on top of the plywood on top of the barbed wire so they can climb over it and they don't get tangled. They would stay low in the brush. We tried to clear as much as we can, but once you set up all the bombs and everything and the flares, you don't want to disrupt that. So it becomes, you just basically keep it that way. And so when I saw all these people coming, I said to my buddy, I said, listen, they're within 100 yards. That was close for us. And then they got 75 yards. So I said, why? We can't shoot until they shoot us. And I said, we could be overtaken before we realize that. What do you want to do? So I said, I know what I'm going to do. If I'm behind the M60 machine gun, I'm going to shoot it. Well, I shot over the heads because I didn't want to kill anybody, you know. I shot over the heads of the enemy, and before you know it, the whole place blew up. It was like everybody thought we were being attacked. So now we're allowed to shoot. So all the bunkers.
You mean from your few shots?
Yeah, from my few shots, the colonel yells, "Who shot that?" Next thing you know is, "I think they shot us." And then the next bunker shot, the next bunker shot, and the cannons were going off. It was amazing. It was like 4th of July. And then it got dark, and the flares were going off. And
how long do you think that took?
This lasted a good maybe 2 hours of the attack. Yeah, of the Tet Offensive.
Wow.
And they say that a lot of these guys, so we shot into darkness, and you can see rounds. They would have tracer rounds, they call them, that light up, so you can see where the bullets are going. So that was that experience with actually an attack. And if I killed anybody, I don't know. I don't know if anybody survived it, but we weren't overtaken, so that was a good thing.
I don't understand that. I mean, how long could you wait? You can't wait too long.
We wait for the orders from the colonel to go ahead and shoot. That's what we're supposed to wait for. And then if he doesn't tell us to shoot, because it was very political, and we, being young as we were, and we would get the newspaper called the Stars and Stripes. The Stars and Stripes was edited to tell us what they wanted us to know.
Wow.
So we didn't know about Woodstock until we came home. We didn't know about all the schools protesting the war. They wanted to protect the soldiers in Vietnam from the indecency that took place during that period of time. And
I didn't know that.
yeah, and we didn't know what was going on, other than letters they couldn't tell us not to read letters from home, but we learned from our family, and they didn't want us to know everything, so they would say, these things were going on.
Did you write back actually where you were, what was happening to home?
No, we didn't have any idea till we got home.
No, but I mean, did you correspond with your folks?
Yeah, I did, but my parents were very protective of me, and they wouldn't tell me all the negative things that were going on. They would say, today we had eggplant parmesan for dinner. They would keep it simple.
And you probably weren't allowed to tell them where you were or what you were doing?
They knew I was in Fubai because they had to send it, but they didn't know exactly where in Fubai, and they didn't know what I did.
Oh.
They didn't know that I had a top secret clearance and all of that. We weren't allowed to communicate that information. So when the compound was being attacked during Tet Offensive, I couldn't discuss any of that with them. And I'm sure they didn't read any of it in the papers because a lot of that is not disclosed.
Wow. That was pretty scary. Did that happen?
It was, and I wasn't even a grunt. I wasn't in infantry, and we did this. We had to learn how to do it, and it was interesting. The 101st Airborne were the greatest guys. They're the only people I know that jump out of perfectly good planes.
Wow.
And we loved them because they were protectors, and they knew how to fight.
They were able to protect themselves too?
Oh,
well?
yeah, they did. They knew how to protect themselves in the need. If they got shot, they knew how to take care of a wound. They were very survival people.
Wow.
And that's what they did. And they were I guess back then they didn't have the SEALs, the SEAL teams and everything. Or if they did, it was the Green Berets.
Oh, yeah.
That's what the kinds of people they were.
The 101st Airborne was
They were the Screaming Eagles. they
Oh,
were
really?
called. The Screaming Eagles.
part of the Army.
Yeah. Oh, it was the Army.
was the Army.
Absolutely. It was a special training group.
So did you witness casualties or destruction?
I witnessed casualties, like people taking out on stretchers and stuff, but I didn't know who the people were. But we would see them go past our compound into the hospital.
The hospital was not right on your base
It
there?
was about maybe half a mile from where we were, and they would put the bodies on their the stretchers on the jeeps or trucks, and they would bring them over. But I never had a buddy in the. We got hit directly once, and one of our soldiers got a wound from shrapnel.
Where were you when that happened?
I was there. I was
In the bunker?
I was in the bunker. He didn't make it in time, and so he got a piece of shrapnel went through his arm, and he was bleeding and everything, and they patched him up. It wasn't fatal,
Oh, good.
so he was okay.
Yeah.
So I didn't witness anybody in our group dying or getting hurt.
Were you ever injured?
No, we were fired upon, but
That's amazing.
But
Thank
I
God.
wasn't injured in any way. And there's a lot of soldiers that went there that weren't injured, but there was a lot that were. And you just have to be lucky.
Yeah.
It's luck. That's all I can think.
I wonder how the enemy could fire at you and be accurate in the dark.
They're not that accurate, actually. They use batteries to launch their little missiles that they put there, and they hope that it gets somewhere close to where they're supposed to be. Very archaic. They didn't have a lot of heavy artillery. They basically were able to escape our mobility and our ability because they would hide in tunnels. And they had tunnels that were whole cities underground.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and they would escape that way. And that's when we used the police dogs to find them. They'd throw hand grenades down in the tunnel and hope that some of them, blew up the tunnels and where they lived.
Wow.
So that's how they were. And they didn't care about taking over land or property. They just wanted to cause aggravation to us. That's what it seemed like.
But they wanted
It
to.
wasn't like World War II where you lined up and you shot each other and then you moved forward, and there wasn't a front.
Oh.
There wasn't anything. We built a compound in the middle of the wilderness, and then we would go out and look for them.
Oh.
There was no front
Wow.
other than the circle we built.
So
That was all.
anywhere could have started a.
Exactly, exactly. And I didn't understand all of that.
Right.
I was just doing what I was supposed to do.
Yeah.
But
Wow.
yeah.
That's pretty scary. How was it serving with your group where everyone became pretty close because you were watching out for each other, I guess?
I think the worst part about the war was the fact there was a lot of drugs over there.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. Marijuana grew in the fields.
Oh.
Drugstores, you can go and get any kind of narcotics you want without a prescription. And a lot of the military got involved with that, and they ended up becoming addicted when they came home. I feel that a lot of the reason that the war went the way it went was because nobody wanted to be there, nobody understood it, and those who did understand it didn't want to be there. And it was horrible because you're in a foreign country, you couldn't understand their language. We used to have Mama's son and Papa's son actually come into our perimeter to do our laundry and stuff.
Really?
And
How
they
did you know they were good guys?
Well, they went through the military police, the MPs, and they get frisked before they come in. But many times, they wear bombs connected to them because the North Vietnam soldiers forced them, and they were just farmers.
Yeah. Oh,
And they would come and they would mistreat them that way.
Oh, wow. They didn't stay on the base, though.
They didn't sleep there. No, they'd leave about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and they would go back through the MPs and go back and stay in town.
Couldn't they tell them, they would look around the base and tell the enemy what it was like? Or?
Oh, they could, but there wasn't much to tell other than we had bunkers, They didn't know they weren't allowed we had vans. We actually worked inside these big semi-trucks.
Oh,
And we had it pretty easy compared to the other people because ours had to be air conditioned. So we had air conditioning.
with generators, is that how?
Generators, yeah. And we were a mobile unit, so if we were attacked, we were supposed to get into these trucks, drive them away from the enemy, or blow up the semi-truck, because it had all top secret material in there.
Did that ever happen?
No, but we would practice. It was interesting to practice. We were buried, the actual trucks were buried in a hole, and we had sandbags piled on top of them so the enemy couldn't see it.
Oh, it must have been pretty deep.
It was deep, several feet, yeah. So the truck could fit and be level with the ground. The problem was during the monsoons, it would fill up with water. So we had to pull it out, and then we had fun because we used it as a pool.
Oh, my
It was
God.
really good to jump in the water, at, different times when it got really warm.
Wow. How do you get the truck out of that depth? How do you get it out?
You start it up, it starts up, we make sure that the engine is always maintained, and there's always gas in the engine, and we back it out. We have it facing like,
Out.
this is the hole, and sometimes we would have to pull it out with another truck to help it get up the hill
Wow.
and out of the hole. I mean, the hole was leveled in like this.
Okay, so it's
that
like
the
a
truck
ramp?
Yeah, so they can get out.
Wow. So you practiced that? So
We
you
practiced it so we could escape, and we went through our gate, and we would make believe the enemy was coming from the north, and we would head south. The enemy's coming from the east, and we'd head west, opposite direction, and hope that the 101st Airborne would stop them before they got us.
I see.
Or we'd have to blow up everything.
Wow.
That was our mission.
Were there bombs on the...
We had incinerators just to blow up the inside of the truck.
Wow.
Semi.
So you stayed in touch with family and friends by mail.
Right.
And
There were no cell phones, no email.
Did it take a long time to get mail?
Yeah, it did. It took a good 2 weeks before we can get a letter, so everything was behind. My mother would send me, she knew we were going to be there 52 weeks, so she would send me cards from a deck of cards. So that would,
Oh, that's
and
nice.
the last card was the Ace of Hearts.
Oh,
That was the
wow.
last time I was there.
Oh, what a good idea.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
So there was nothing really for recreation other than on the base?
Well, I organized a little football team that we,
Oh, you did?
yeah, just amongst our guys, and we hooked up with the 101st Airborne, and we did stuff with them, and the Seabees, which was the Navy, the construction workers, and we would get uniforms. We put a big peace sign as one of our shirts, and we would play. Everything
Yeah.
was very dusty and dirty.
Dirty.
So,
And hot, probably.
and hot. So we would play. We got used to the heat, but we did that. But there was no other recreation. There was a mess hall that we went to, and we went on leave. I went to Bangkok. Bob Hope came.
Oh, you did?
That kind of stuff.
In Thailand? he
Yeah, in
came?
Thailand. Yeah. So we got to do that, and that was about it. And
Did you get leave often?
you're allowed one leave a year. So I got 30 days that I could spend out of country, but I couldn't go home. I had to stay like in Thailand or Bangkok or one of these other places.
So you had to use the 30 days all at once?
Yeah.
Well, you couldn't
Pretty
break
much.
it up like a week at a time?
No, this wasn't like,
Oh.
no, they want to make sure you got there safely and got back. So I got to swim in the China Sea
Oh, wow.
as I looked at the military boats in the ocean.
Wow.
I had my M16 with me at all
You did,
times.
you
When you
did.
get a haircut, you have your M16. Papa Son gives you a haircut, you hold your rifle between your legs with your hand on your trigger. Because when he puts that knife up next to you to cut your hair,
Yeah.
you want to make sure he's not cutting you.
Oh, my God.
It's just
How do you
strange.
learn that
But you
stuff?
get used to it. Well, you learn from the guys that were there longer. So the people that were there for 6 months or 7 months or 8 months, and they're getting close to coming home, they teach you all of this.
Wow.
You
Amazing.
don't learn that from basic training. No, you
no.
learn that when you're in country.
Wow.
They call it in country.
How did you get to Thailand? Was it military
They
vehicle?
flew, yeah,
They
they flew
fly
us,
you?
yeah, with a helicopter.
Ah. Now, so you stayed there until 70, you said?
Yeah, 69, 70, yeah.
And how did you return home?
That was an interesting story because I couldn't tell my parents the exact day because I didn't know the exact day I was coming home.
Really? Oh.
No, but we flew into Alaska and
Military plane.
military plane. And as we landed, I remember looking across the tarmac. Back then, it was the Pan American flight. That was called the Freedom Bird. We called it the Freedom Bird because it meant we're going home. And I was scared right up to the end, even in Alaska, thinking that something's going to blow up.
Why?
And I was going to die. I don't know, because there's always the stories about guys, they had, we used to call it like if you had 5 days left, that means you had 4 days and a wake up. Okay, a wake up means the day that you're leaving. You're going to wake up and you're going to go home. So we always heard stories about guys on wake up, they got killed. So they don't usually give, when you have less than a week left, they don't give them anything dangerous to do. They just let them hang out during that period of time. And that's what I did for that week.
But being on that plane, you were still nervous?
Once I got on the Freedom Bird and it was a commercial flight and I was in the States, I felt better.
Okay.
But I landed in Newark, New Jersey, and I had no way
Went
to
to
get
Alaska
home.
first and then Newark?
Alaska, then Newark, yeah.
Okay.
Straight to Newark. And Vietnam, Alaska to Newark.
Okay.
There was about a 2-hour layover in Alaska, so I got to see Alaska from the airport. And I landed in Newark, New Jersey, and I tell you the truth, I didn't know how I was going to get home from there. So I ended up, I had a few dollars on me, and so I got a cab, took a cab all the way from Newark to Brooklyn.
Oh, wow.
The cab driver was really nice, and he said he didn't charge me.
You were in uniform?
Yeah, I was wearing my uniform.
Nice.
I gave up my M16 machine gun. I wasn't allowed to bring it with me.
Wait, when did you give that up, in Alaska?
When you land in Alaska, you turn it in because now you're out of the war zone, so you don't need to walk around with the M16 machine gun.
But you still were supposed to wear your uniform till you got home.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And when you get home, you can take it off. But I arrived at 3 o'clock in the morning. So I rang my doorbell in Brooklyn.
You're kidding, at 3 in the morning? Your
Well, I
parents'
didn't
house?
know what to do. No,
Right.
they were sleeping. Everything was dark.
Yeah.
And my father and mother came down wondering who it was, and it was me.
Oh,
And they didn't
wow.
expect me home, so it was...
What a shock.
Oh, it was. They were happy to see
But it
me.
was good.
It was a good shock.
How were you received by the rest of the family and community?
My family was okay. My friends that I hung out with that went to, they got a leave of, they didn't get drafted because they had they were going to college. And if you go to
Deferment.
college, you get a deferment.
Right.
And the ones that were going to college and had a deferment, or they got a physical deferment from one of heart problems or whatever, they didn't treat me very nice. I remember sitting at a bar one day and they told me I was a baby killer, and I had nothing to do with any of that. And I didn't even know what they were talking about. So I started reading up on a lot of the information and realized that the Melee incident and all that, where they killed a whole town of people. I didn't know that happened, and nobody ever told us that was going on. And I learned about Woodstock, and I missed that. I missed going to Woodstock. That would have been fun. So when I got home, I wasn't treated very well by them. A lot of them didn't want to have much to do with me.
Oh, these were your friends before you
These
left?
were my friends in Brooklyn before I left that I went to school with and everything. I tried to explain to them that I didn't really kill anybody and that I wasn't out there to do that, and they wanted to know why I went and why I just didn't go to Canada. Because I had some friends that went to Canada. And I told them that I didn't think that was the right thing to do, that I should just serve. And I did.
Wow. How was it adjusting to civilian life? You came home and then did you go back to work, or?
Well, when I came back, I still had a year left in the military. So I had to, I had to serve that last year.
Right. So
So I got sent to San Pedro, California for the defense of the West Coast.
Oh, right.
And then I got sent to Fort Lewis, Washington, and Yakima, Washington Fire Base. So I served there. When I came back home right after Vietnam, it was a very difficult time to adjust because we have sirens going off when you're in Vietnam. The sirens tell us that there's going to be incoming rounds and we're being attacked. So I got used to that sound. Well, the siren goes off at noon all the time in Brooklyn, too.
Oh.
And so I would end up going under the table all the time.
Wow.
So that, I mean, but after a while you get used to it.
I guess.
And what seems to be incurable with loving parents and
Your brother was home at the time?
my brother was home. He was working. And, we would start having dinner, for 4 weeks. We were home. And so until I had to go back. And the rest of the service in the military was fairly easy compared
What did you
to
do
that.
in California and Washington?
Well, in San Pedro, I was defense of the West Coast, and they transferred me to work with civilians, basically providing supplies to the civilians for cleaning barracks and taking care of the firing base. They made it easy for me at the end, because I only had a year left, so I had a lot of free time.
No, that's good.
It's kinda nice.
What did you do with it?
I ended up going to Yakima College and took some courses there.
Oh, good.
Yeah, so it was kind of nice.
Did you finish your college degree eventually?
In Brooklyn, yeah,
Oh.
Brooklyn College. In fact, I'm thankful for the GI Bill because I bought my first house in Oceanside, because if you served honorably, you don't have to put a down payment on the house.
Nice.
And my first house was $34,500.
Wow, amazing. Yeah.
It was, and I didn't have to put anything down. The GI Bill guaranteed the loan. And I was able to go to college, Brooklyn College, and they
Nice.
helped pay my way.
Great.
So
Well,
it
you
was nice.
deserved it.
Yeah, it was good. It was good.
What did you get a degree in?
Social sciences. I was a social worker.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
That's what you did when you got the degree after?
No, I felt that wasn't a good thing. I ended up going for my friend for an interview for Aetna, and I ended up working for Aetna for the rest of my life.
Really? In
Yeah.
insurance?
Yeah, in insurance
Oh, wow.
business. Yeah.
Nice.
Interesting, huh?
Very interesting, yep. Have you remained in contact with any fellow veterans?
Yes, there's a couple of veterans that I've stay in touch with. Ore, he's in upstate New York. Him and I remain in contact.
Were you together in Vietnam?
Yep.
Oh, wow, that's
and
nice.
him and I write each other and email each other, and
Very
once in
nice.
a while things. It's very comforting to know he's still alive and he's
Yeah.
doing well.
He's doing well.
Some of my fellow guys get old and die from natural causes. They didn't die in Vietnam, but I'm young. I should live to be 80, but these guys died when they were 60,
You think it was from exposure over
Well,
there?
no, I don't know. I don't know if they got tested for Agent Orange.
Yeah. Were you exposed?
I was exposed, but I didn't. It never affected me.
Oh, good. How do you think your wartime experiences affected your life?
It taught me patience. It taught me that how to obey people, how to take orders. Actual being in Vietnam taught me how to work under pressure, how to deal with circumstances that are intolerable, and how to accept people. I mean, the South Vietnamese people were under war their whole lives. I used to go into town and eat dinner with Mama Son because I liked to. We weren't allowed to, but I did it anyway.
In a local restaurant?
No, in front of her shed. She lived in a shed made out of Coca-Cola cans for the roof,
No.
crushed. They would put them under the tanks to crush them, and then they would make their roofs out of tin cans.
So what food did you eat?
I'm not sure.
Oh, God.
I'm not sure. It could have been dog, it could have been pork. I'm not sure. But she cooked for me the best way she knew how.
Nice.
And I have pictures of her and the people in the town there. But they were constantly a war-torn country,
Yeah.
constantly. My dog got blown up in the minefield next to us. We had a minefield. We had our compound, but to the right of the compound was a minefield that the French put in.
Oh.
But we didn't know where the mines were. So my dog
You had a dog?
Yeah, I had a dog. It was a wild dog, and I became friends, and
Mm-hmm.
we'd bring home food from the mess hall, and we'd feed
Oh.
it. And he would, his name was Piggy, because he ate a lot. But he got blown up in the minefield,
Aw.
lost his leg, and then we gave, and they have a hospital, a veterinarian hospital for
Oh.
the police dogs.
Oh,
So I sent them there.
near the
and-
base?
And near the base, and they healed him, and gave him back to me.
Oh,
And we changed his name from Piggy to Tripod, because he only had 3 legs,
Oh.
just like the tripod.
but he understood what you were saying? Because, I mean, how did he know English? I don't know.
Oh, the
The
Vietnamese?
dog, the
Oh,
dog.
the dog.
You trained him.
We trained him to hang out with us and
Yeah.
do things with us.
That's
I mean,
nice.
I didn't train him to be a sniffer of bombs, because that takes a whole
Right.
different kind of, he was just a pet.
Yeah. What happened when you left?
When I left, somebody else took over the dog, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah, my friend took over the dog, and then later on I found he was sleeping under one of the trucks, and he got ran over,
Ah,
and he died.
oh, nice
What are you gonna
pet,
do?
though.
Yeah,
That's
it was
nice.
wonderful.
How do you think your military, what are some life lessons you learned from the military? I guess you kind of covered that.
Yeah, I mean, being in the insurance business, you got to follow a lot of rules. So, following the rules and taking tests, and I learned how to take tests properly and study for them. The military helped me a lot with dealing with different ethnic backgrounds too. There were people from the South. I couldn't barely understand them.
Really?
They had the Southern drawl, and I was from New York, and they probably didn't understand me, and we had to learn how to get along.
I was going to ask you, was that both ways then? It was
Yeah,
a
I'm
little
sure. I'm sure
learning experience.
they called me New Yorker, guy from Brooklyn, or, they saw that I was a city guy, and they were from, maybe a small town.
Rural,
Or in
maybe?
Kansas or something, And I mean, because the military, they brought in people that were uneducated. They didn't go to college,
Right.
because the ones that are in college couldn't get drafted. You have a lot of ethnic backgrounds, a lot of black African Americans that ended up in there, a lot of Spanish. So being brought up in an Italian neighborhood in Bensonhurst, I got to know these people and get to know how they were, and got to see that they were real people and they weren't any different than anybody else. I mean, yeah, their traditions were different, their food was different, how they speak to each other, and the jokes. I had to learn all that. It's all different. So, yeah, I think that's a big thing that the military teaches you.
Well,
how to
that's
get
maybe a
along.
good thing. Everybody kind of tried to
It's a
get along.
brotherhood.
Yes, you had to get along, actually.
Yeah, and whether you liked it or not, they were prejudiced people, don't get me wrong. There was prejudiced military guys who didn't like the South. The South didn't like the Yankees.
Ah.
They called us Yankees. But when you fight a war together, kind of like that changes a little bit.
Yes, right.
They may still have it deep down inside, a prejudice streak, because that's how they were brought up. But I learned how to get along with people.
Nice.
That was a big thing.
Nice. How do you think your military service impacted your feelings about war and the military in general?
When those towers, the Twin Towers came down,
Yeah.
I was very angry.
Yeah.
We had people that died in the Twin Towers. And
Was your office there?
no, but we had my daughter's friends from
Oh.
Kings Park High School
Really?
died. She was in the top floor working for the Wall Street firm that was
Oh,
there.
wow.
And I was angry because they bombed my city. And I wanted to take up arms and blow up the whole country. But then I calmed down, and I realized not everybody in that country were bad. There were just some that were radical. It was hard for me. And and now the way the war is going on, there's war all over the place. There isn't any place where we're not present. And who knows about things that go on that aren't broadcast.
Right.
Private black ops and all those kinds of things that go on. And I'm just happy that they're there. I'm happy that they're young, because I can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
I can only get angry.
Yeah, but you did your duty, you really did, and then some. What message would you like to leave for future generations who might hear this interview?
Politics makes war look bad, and nobody likes war. But if you see a military guy and you're against war and you're more of a kind of person that's passive, that's okay. Just respect the guy in uniform.
Yeah.
That's all we ask,
Yeah.
that you respect them and what they do.
Yeah.
That's my message.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for your service, Frank. Is there anything else we didn't cover that you might want to
No.
add? Any stories?
I'll call you.
Call me. Thank you so much for your service. We really appreciate it, and for sharing all your memories. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.